when Dr. King finally spoke out against the Vietnam War, and he said, I had to speak out to erase my names from the bombs that were falling over North and South Vietnam. And your actions in this organization, organizing this event, and all of the things you do are erasing your names from the Hellfire missiles, from the drones, from the bunker busters, and for all the munitions that are unleashed on innocent people in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Pakistan and Libya and beyond. But in the active duty military today, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who could really explain why it is we have to endlessly have our legs blown off and watch our friends killed and kill other people in Afghanistan. And the words that that active duty soldier said to all of you, when I was 19 years old, preparing to invade Iraq in March of 2003, unsure of what we were really doing, kind of suspicious about what we were doing, not totally believing what we were being told in the press. If I had someone like that who had been to war, and who said, I went, this was the experience, it is messed up, it is wrong, you're not wrong for feeling those things, but not only that, but you have the absolute right to not go, and there are a variety of legal options available to soldiers to not deploy, that I could have been won over, I could have been saved, and I could have not gone on that deployment and done the things that I did. And so that's why in March Forward, the organization I work with, we've launched a new campaign called Our Lives, Our Rights, which does specifically that. Is empowers active duty service members and Iraq and Afghanistan veterans to engage in aggressive outreach to other active duty troops who are set to deploy to Afghanistan, saying, I've had this experience, if I could turn back the clock, I wouldn't go, and that's exactly what you can do, and we're gonna help you do it. There's leaflets over on a table over there. There's a pamphlet here. Thousands of these pamphlets were distributed all over Fort Lewis Army Base, in the hospitals and the barracks by active duty soldiers and Iraq and Afghanistan veterans saying, we should not go to the war in Afghanistan, we should resist it, and there's a community of people that will help you resist. And right now there are soldiers in Afghanistan that we are in touch with who have turned in their rifles, who have said, we are conscientious objectors and we refuse to kill and die for this criminal war any longer. And that's what's possible through the organizing of people like this and brave activists like yourselves. There's two Americas. On the one side sits the masses of people who work, who produce all of the wealth in this rich society, who build the houses, who stock the shelves, who forge steel. Those masses of people who look at the unemployment numbers with great fear because they don't know if they're going to be able to put food on their table in a month. The 80 million people who are in danger of going bankrupt from hospital bills. In fact, the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country is hospital bills. And the vast majority of those people who go bankrupt from hospital bills actually have health insurance and pay quite a great deal every month for health insurance. Where 3.5 million families with children are in danger of losing their home, of sleeping on the street. Where in fact 1 million school children every year in the richest country in the world sleep on the street. That's a side that worries about cuts because they don't know if they're going to lose their job, if they're going to lose their health care, if they're going to lose their HIV treatment. And the side that has to worry about going to war, whose children go to war, whose husbands and wives and brothers and sisters go to war. That's one America. But then there's this other America that was embodied in that room, in that luncheon. And that's the America that doesn't have to work. Like people like Mitt Romney, right? I mean, it was revealed in his tax returns in the election that he made $20 million last year that he could have made if he was in a coma. He didn't actually show up to a job. He just made $20 million out of thin air. That one America of the oil tycoons, the media moguls, the defense contractors, the lobbyists, and of course their loyal friends and servants in Washington. That America doesn't actually worry about having to go to war. I think if you were to take a poll of soldiers in the military today and ask them how many had a father or mother who was sitting on a corporate board of Raytheon or Boeing or of ExxonMobil, I think you'd find the answer would be zero. Because when war is waged in their interests, they don't send their own neighbors and friends and family. They send those who want to be able to go to college, who want to be able to put food on their table, who want health care for their children, who want to be able to have a home. But that other America, they're the ones who say, when it's time to go to war, that we are all in this together, that we're on the same side and we have the same interests. And they want to unite us and unite around bombing other poor people, other people who are struggling halfway around the world. The interests of that America, the one that sits in the White House and the Pentagon and Wall Street, their interests are very simple. And that interest is maximizing profit for a very small group of people at whatever expense necessary. And we see that expressed in a variety of different ways. We see that expressed here domestically in the form of layoffs, in the form of budget cuts, in the form of bank bailouts. All of the things we see on the domestic front to enrich that small group of people at the expense of all of us. We see it expressed in destruction of the planet, where corporate profits, quarterly profits, trump sustainability for life to exist on the planet, where very literally, the world's biggest polluters, in order to save a few $1 million a year, will completely trash ecosystems and lead to really catastrophic climate change, because that is the one motive in the system. It isn't life, it isn't preserving anything, it's just about that bottom line for investors, and a very small group of investors. But it's most expressed in the vast US empire and war machine that has been built. It's most expressed in this network of over 800 military bases in over 130 countries. And if you know how many countries there are on Earth, that's like most of the countries. We see it expressed through occupations, through war, through drone strikes. The Iraq War, a war that we know today, every single reason we were given for going to that war was based on a lie. And a lie that the politicians, when they are telling them to us, when they're saying support the troops and patting us on the back, knew that the justifications they were giving for that war was a lie. A war that took the lives of over 1.3 million Iraqis, took the lives of over 5,000 US soldiers, that created 5 million refugees, that caused tens of thousands of soldiers to be amputees, that caused hundreds of thousands, if not more than 1 million, to be psychologically traumatized for the rest of their lives. And of course, the toll on the civilian population in Iraq is of course 1,000 times worse. But that is just a microcosm of US foreign policy as a whole. And that what drove us to the Iraq War and continuing that war is what drives US foreign policy everywhere. I didn't go into the military thinking the things I do now. It was through my own firsthand experiences, and that main firsthand experience being realizing our commonality and common interests with the people we're told are our enemies. But for me, going there as someone who tried to believe in it 100%, willing to die for whatever I was told to die for me it was people who reminded me of my own family. In particular, a man who was shot through the neck because he didn't want to wait in line at a traffic checkpoint. And my job in this man's dying moments was to interrogate him and find out, as he was choking on his own blood, why he tried to get out of the line in that checkpoint. And that man, through his tears, through choking on his own blood, just said, I just wanted to go home and see my family. I just wanted to go home and see my family. And I went back to my bunk that night, or wherever I was sleeping, and I couldn't help but think of my own father and what he would have done. I couldn't help but think that this was their home. I was just some 19-year-old kid who wasn't from there. And then that night, when we were attacked, as we normally were, for the first time I understood why. I realized that whoever was shooting at us wasn't my enemy, he was someone just like me, and I'd probably be doing the same exact thing if I was on that side. And in fact, I had far more in common with poor and working people in Iraq than I did with the millionaire politicians I saw sending me to war in 2003. The forces that sent us to war, the forces that keep us at war, against the will of the vast majority of people in this great democracy. I mean, all polls show that over 75% of the American public wants an immediate end to the Afghanistan war. That within the active duty ranks of the military, over 70% 73% to be precise, want an immediate end to the war in Afghanistan. Yet it continues indefinitely. And it seems daunting, but here on MLK Day, we can realize that it's not an impossible task, and that the struggle for civil rights occurred under the most adverse circumstances, against the most entrenched power structures. And organizers who fought for civil rights didn't just deal with trying to mobilize a lot of people. They dealt with the full weight of state repression, of the FBI, of COINTELPRO, of people getting arrested, of people getting assassinated. They dealt with Klan terrorism in the South, and lynch mobs and things of that nature. That despite all of the weight of the state and of right-wing fascist forces, they still won. Because it doesn't matter how much you can try to turn against it, how much power you have, nothing can stop the will of the people when the people are in motion. That was an idea. Civil rights was an idea whose time has come, and it came because nothing could stop it. And just like they were able to win civil rights under the most adverse circumstances, one of the most historic victories, we too can end the era of war, the era of imperialism, and the era of empire. And that's one of the main messages we should take today from Dr. King and his legacy. They didn't like him, the establishment, but they were able to tolerate him to a large degree. The establishment could tolerate him being for civil rights and a civil rights organizer because this was something that was changing in society, a problem that society was no doubt having to overcome. They could deal with him speaking out against the Vietnam War because there's even people within the establishment at that time speaking out against the Vietnam War, which is characteristic of a war that's being lost, like the war in Afghanistan. But what they couldn't accept, what made Dr. King so dangerous, was that he was connecting the issues. What made him so dangerous was saying that the bombs that are falling over Vietnam are also falling in Harlem, are also falling in Los Angeles. That we are bulldozing schools here in the United States to buy bombs to destroy schools in Vietnam, like we're doing today in Afghanistan and elsewhere. That is what made him so dangerous. Was not pointing at a single issue, but saying that all of the social ills, the problems of war, the problems of poverty, the problems of inequality, these are rooted in the system itself. And that if we want to fight on each of these individual fronts, the way we are most successful is by uniting all of those who are fighting on all these different issues into one common struggle and challenging that power structure at its core. That's why he was dangerous, and that's why he had to be killed. Situation today in Afghanistan, another war for resources, another war for empire, is that the politicians, and regardless of what you think about the war and whether or not it's right or any of that the politicians in Washington and the military commanders admit that the war cannot be won, that the war is a lost cause, that there is no military victory to be had in Afghanistan. Yet they continue to send wave after wave of young men and women to have their legs blown off, to be killed, and to kill other people. And admitting that the war is hopeless, that inevitably U.S. forces will be pushed out, that there will be a withdrawal, then that means that what is happening right now is a retreat by the U.S. military, but a retreat in slow motion. A retreat that's happening for no other reason than so those politicians who are at the helm of the war machine don't have to accept responsibility for a failed mission on their watch. So they don't have to accept responsibility for a military defeat at the hands of one of the poorest countries on the planet. So every U.S. service member who dies, who becomes an amputee, every Afghan who dies, becomes an orphan because an amputee, is dying now because the rich politicians and their rich friends on Wall Street don't want the responsibility of a failed mission, and they'll continue sending us over and over again until the people stand up and fight against it. That's what we're doing with the Our Lives, Our Rights campaign, reaching out to all those soldiers and saying, this is the situation, your life is being thrown away into a political chess game that benefits nobody except people who make millions and billions of dollars, which is not us. And if you really want to fight in our interests, we don't do it fighting for bankers and billionaires overseas, we do it fighting for our friends and family and neighbors right here at home, and that's what you should do instead of fighting that bogus war in Afghanistan. So thanks everyone. Continue honoring the legacy of Dr. King and remembering that despite all odds, they continued to fight and fight and fight, and they won. Thank you.
Tell them.
The website is marchforward.org and ourlivesourrights.org, and there's flyers on that table.